Okay, well, thank you all for joining and welcome to our 2022 Marketing Partner Forum recap. This was the 29th annual conference this January. So I see more people are jumping on, but we'll go ahead and get started. So, the past 2 years have really propelled a lot of new issues that brought them to the forefront that are affecting how law firms operate. And so, is your law firm finding it difficult to attract and retain associates or junior partners? Are you finding that there are bigger generational gaps between associates and more senior partners? Are you finding it difficult to train lawyers and in this virtual world? And are you having issues with team building and keeping the fabric of your organization intact? So I'm sure most of you are nodding, if not all, nodding yes. Obviously, these are some of the biggest challenges facing firms today. And while many of these are not new issues, the events of the past 2 years have really kind of created a seismic shift that firms are struggling to cope with. And so before we get into the meat of the presentation, my name is Aly Crea. I'm the Account Director with Burbay Marketing and PR. We're a full service public relations and marketing firm, and we've been around for nearly 25 years. And we specialize in creating visibility and credibility that fuels revenue growth for law, finance, and real estate firms. So going back to the questions that I posed, not only did these issues permeate throughout almost all discussions at Marketing Partner Forum, but Thomson Reuters also recently released its 2022 State of the Market report, which really puts some data behind these issues that firms are facing. And in a survey of law firm executives, they identified the greatest risk to profitability firms would likely face this year. And those were lawyer recruitment and retention, poaching of staff by competitors, and increasing associate salaries. And compared to a 2022 survey, these 3 issues were not even in the top 5 risks in 2020. So just in the past 2 years, again, we're seeing this seismic shift in risk to law firms and profitability. And so these are really huge issues to tackle. But hopefully, this recap sheds some insight on what other firms are doing and maybe provide some ideas for all of you today. So let's just take a quick look at some of the other data from Thomson Reuters State of the Market report. These 2 graphs are really showing that the demand for legal services has grown tremendously, as we all know. And as a result, hours worked for lawyers has gone up as well. Equity and non-equity partner hours are increasing, and basically associates have returned to pre-pandemic hours. And you can see the graph on the right, the top line that looks green, hopefully you can see that color, is the associate hours that have worked. And so in addition to this data, Thomson Reuters really shows that associates are truly the young and the restless. That 1 out of every 4 associates are leaving their firm. And turnover is happening across all firms, but AmLaw 100 firms are leading the charge, then followed by AmLaw 200, and then all other mid-sized firms. And so how are firms responding? There's no surprise, we know this, that firms have responded by compensation. This includes, huge salary adjustments, signing bonuses. And the graph on the right, the bar chart, you can see that AmLaw 100 had the biggest increase with 15.6%, followed by AmLaw 200 by 10%, and then shortly close behind is all other mid-sized firms at 9%. So, and although associate compensation is trending upward, it's still not enough to quell the turnover that's happening. Other factors besides compensation are coming into play. And so kind of the big question that looms is this sustainable? Is this huge increase in associate compensation putting law firm profits at risk? So the next is, where are associates going? Emerging from the pandemic, we know that attitudes towards life and work have changed drastically. Loyalty to law firms has waned. Associates and younger attorneys are really concerned about flexibility. They want control over their working arrangements. And we know there's a huge focus more on purpose and meaning, and it's not just about the work. And in another survey that Thomson Reuters conducted, they showed that 27% of associates that were surveyed said they would leave for higher compensation, but compared to 60% who responded that they would leave for a better work-life balance. So and we're seeing this play out as well. I mean, either associates are being outbid by larger firms or competition, or they're leaving the industry entirely, or they're working for judges, state prosecutors, other government jobs, or moving in-house entirely. So this last graph we're going to look at really stood out to me. And even one CMO panelist said that this made her kind of look at associate training differently. So this graph shows data, again, from another survey of top performing lawyers. These were not associates. And the results were no surprise. The results basically said that most lawyers want to reduce their commitments to non-billable work. But this graph kind of shows more clearly how these lawyers ranked certain initiatives. And you can see on the bottom lower right corner where it says under popular, you can see that attorneys ranked involvement in things like marketing, which includes networking, training, diversity initiatives, lateral and graduate recruitment, mentoring as very unpopular. So essentially they don't want to do this work and they would rather delegate to someone else. So we talked about obviously that widening gap and the challenges firms are facing with training. And here we can see that this is not just anecdotal feedback, there's actual data that shows how this gap is happening. So I'd like to keep in mind the data we just saw and now compare to a survey that a chief strategy officer for an AmLaw 200 firm conducted with their associates. And the associates were overwhelmingly Gen Z and millennials. And the survey asked, what skills were these associates most interested in? And I mean, some of the responses might be surprising to you. Networking was a huge response. So really they're looking for true coaching on how to do it in person and virtually. And compared to the data from the last graph, top performing lawyers are not, they ranked this as something they were uninterested in. It wasn't very popular. So, where are associates getting the networking training they want? And, maybe ask yourself, is your firm providing this for associates? Another big response was they're looking for community and civic involvement. As we mentioned before, we said this over and over again, that the younger generation and associates are looking for passion and purpose, but they don't know exactly where to start and where to spend their time. So this could be an opportunity for firms to highlight some community or civic involvement that they're focusing on. It could be a tool for recruitment. And then one of the other responses was they're interested in building client relationships. So this generation really has different expectations. They want opportunities to advance. And this really translates into more connection points to clients and getting credit for it. So, and then a few other responses included internal marketing. As we've all seen that, we've lost kind of the water cooler conversations with the virtual world. And, this generation wants to connect with others, but they don't know how to do it. And then the final was involvement in pitches. Now, one of the other questions was posed, how much time are they willing to dedicate to professional development and business development? And overwhelmingly, everyone, responded that they're very willing to invest and that lunchtime is a preferred time for them for trainings or programs. So I think it made a lot of people think that, maybe it's time to change some of the programs they're providing or cater a little bit differently to this generation. So what does all of this mean? I mean, we looked at a lot of data points. I mean, these are all challenges we've certainly heard before, but it's really just pointing to this huge disconnect between associates, younger attorneys, more senior attorneys, what they want and what firms are providing. So really what we're seeing is associates want to learn, want to network and participate in non-billable activities compared to more senior attorneys who view those activities as unpopular. They want to learn, but in a new way. It's not that old way, not the traditional mentorship that we're used to seeing. And, they indicated maybe lunchtime is a good option. So this really means that a new curriculum needs to be considered and thought about and provided. And, finally, I think it's also about shifting the conversation to associates. They want advancement and they're looking for a purpose. So they need to know that they're not really just another cog in a machine. They're part of something bigger. And so these past 2 years have also been challenging for many junior partners as well. Some of the things that we're seeing were that junior partners struggle to develop a core book of business. They've struggled to build their personal brands. And they too have noticed the generational shift among legal professionals. So one session focused on, what elements can be offered to combat these challenges. Similar to associates, there needs to be a new curriculum and not the new tradition, not the traditional mentorship path. In one panel that included the CEO of Buckhalter and the Global Chief Business Development Officer at Morgan Lewis, they shared examples of what's worked for them. So specifically, one firm talked about a retention program for laterals, and one firm assigned a sponsor, not a mentor, to the lateral. They intentionally selected a sponsor that had weighed in on the lateral that was hired, and this was done because they really noticed a greater investment by the sponsor to see this lateral succeed. For one firm, specifically for homegrown attorneys, they established a rising class of talent. This was a program that focused on teaching the fundamentals of business development, how it worked at their firm, and basically law firm economics. They saw that this program did keep attorneys loyal, but it did require a lot of one-on-one. And then for junior partners, one firm handpicked 10 to 12 partners for a year-long program. Throughout the course, each partner was judged on a few metrics that were identified at the outset and then given a scorecard. And this was important because, you don't always win a client right away. It's a long journey. So they needed a way to show some measurement of progress. And, these aren't earth-shattering ideas. I mean, I'm sure you've heard similar things before, but how do you know if these programs will actually be successful? And how do you track and measure success? So some of the firms shared what they had done as well. And, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take years to show progress of if these programs work. But of course, implementing reviews is absolutely necessary, but even taking a step back, these reviews won't be helpful unless you have clearly defined competencies for business development so that they can be judged against them in reviews. One firm was able to take a snapshot of a partner's baseline book of business and then followed it over the years. But really, and one thing that was agreed upon by all panelists was getting qualitative feedback versus quantitative. Quantitative was just not as useful. So qualitative was a little bit more useful at times because, again, the business development journey is long. And again, you've got to find some certain metrics along the way that are more qualitative to show progress and to help partners track how they're doing. And then lastly, you need just the right individual with the right attitude really boils down to if these are going to be successful programs. And if partner is unwilling, the program won't succeed. So it really just depends on making sure you have people interested and willing to be involved. So I'd like to pose a few questions to you all, and you can answer silently. And these were same questions posed to the audience as well at Marketing Partner Forum. And first one is, does your firm have open lines of communication with potential hires? If you answered no, or you're unsure, this definitely needs to be communicated more clearly and transparently with hires, and there needs to be core competencies that, again, as we mentioned earlier, can be judged against. So the second question is, how is your firm communicating business development skills required for pathway to partnership? Some of the responses actually at the conference were during annual reviews or not communicating at all. So this was surprising on how infrequent communication happens. And again, it points to this big communication gap from partners and the fact that this just needs to be happening more and earlier on. And the final question was, does your firm's culture support business developing programming for associates? The results were mixed on this question. And I think this really used to be a no, but now it's becoming, prerequisite for a lot of firms. Okay, so now that we've solved all the issues around the generational shift, I'm going to shift gears to talk about what firms are doing around innovation. And innovation is still at the forefront for all firms. And in one session, the chief innovation officers across multiple firms discussed how marketing and innovation teams can collaborate and work together to transform client service. So I'm going to start with kind of the big question asked to the panelists is, how can firms create a culture of innovation or have it become part of the firm's DNA? And so the Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer from Ballard Spahr put it very nicely. She said, it begins with innovating at two fronts. And the first one is client-facing innovation, and the second is internal innovation to be more efficient. And really this boils down to saving costs for clients. And so for most firms, this innovation can mean, new technology. How many times have you all been tasked with looking into new technology or been pitched about a new CRM system? And that's not to say these platforms or this technology isn't great, but there needs to be someone or a team that can actually drive the internal technology and someone who can speak it. And the panelists were in agreement that innovation really needs to be pushed down into various departments to implement before it can be have widespread adoption. And so going back to the two fronts, the Chief Marketing and Business Development Officer said that, really if you can innovate these two fronts, these paths will eventually lead to the DNA of innovation. But again, this is not something that's going to happen overnight, and it really does take a long time. So, and sounds great, but how are these firms actually fostering innovation, and what are the actual examples that they're implementing across levels? And I don't know if any of you attended last year's Marketing Partner Forum or tuned into our webinar as well. There was a fantastic keynote speaker that discussed innovation, and that firstly, you really need to make time for it. And so one of the firms talked about how they implemented an innovation week. And this included presentations from practice groups on an idea or technology or new research that was applicable to their work. And then they all voted on the best presentation or ideas that they would like to implement. One firm actually rewarded attorneys for hours spent on innovation. And then even on a very simple level, one firm suggested implementing a suggestion box that any attorney could submit anything into this box. And then they also talked about, naive experts. And again, this is going back to last year's keynote that spoke on innovation. And really that the concept of the naive expert, which really means inviting someone who doesn't have the same background to the meeting, someone who might be in a different department, someone maybe who's not a lawyer, the person that's not afraid to ask the questions that you might think are too silly or simple or stupid, but they're willing to ask those questions and make people think about something differently. There's also a lot of challenges or grievances that come up when we're talking about innovation. One of the biggest challenges is, how do you sell innovation to senior partners? How do you get them to truly commit and implement? The other challenges are, with so many new ideas or suggestions, like, how do you adopt them all and how do you measure success? And then, what else can you be doing with all these great things your firms are doing? So I'll start with the first question. And to put it simply, you have to work with the willing in terms of being able to sell innovation to a firm. And that might not be the senior partner. One firm said they used a senior associate to implement technology for a case they were handling. The senior associate was able to show how successful it was, and eventually other partners got on board. Now, with so many new ideas, again, how do you implement? How do you measure? I think this comes down to really having a dedicated innovation team or committee. It really allows for ideas to be pushed into various departments. In terms of measuring, again, we go back to qualitative measuring versus quantitative. A lot of the panelists said that you can't measure it by clicks or subscribers, that it's really about the feedback from people. It's about the success stories. And those success stories can really roll over into client discussions. And one firm even said they had dedicated project managers, which has been a game changer. And then the final piece about what else firms should be doing is really, you should be publicizing your innovations. We heard from GCs at this conference, and we've heard from GCs in previous years, that general counsel, that they want to know what your firm is doing, and they want to collaborate with you, and they want to know that you are sharing information. So if your firm is innovating or implementing new technology, it's really important to share that information. And so, in just a brief recap of the key takeaways from this discussion, was that innovation really boils down to being a combination of internally focused initiatives around efficiency, coupled with quality of life and the client's needs. Best innovation happens when the client and employee come together. And really, the time is now. There's more money for innovation than there has ever been before. And to not be afraid of failure, to embrace it, because it really brings you one step closer to success. Okay, so this next session that I'm going into now is really offered a candid look at the evolving corporate legal department. How are in-house leaders addressing talent needs or skill set gaps within their firms? And the panel consisted of 3 general counsels from various industries. And this is always one of the most insightful panels, because you hear feedback directly from GCs. And a common question we often hear from firms is, how do I target general counsel? What can I do to get my foot in the door? So we're going to start with the top 3 questions they discussed. And the first one is, what are GCs saying they're focused on in 2022? Many of the responses are the same as law firms. They're focused on social and corporate responsibility. One firm is launching a 3-year plan focused on growth, and this is a tool they're using to get the team invested so they stick around. One firm is, battling the Great Resignation, as all firms are, or one company is. And there's a big focus on younger employees and giving them a reason to come back to work, and really bridging the gap between generations. And so the GCs agreed there is a huge generational divide between obviously expectations, what we talked about, and it creates a barrier for team building. So the next question posed was, how do GCs build teams across generations when there's a disconnect? So they don't leave, and so they continue to help keep the fabric of an organization intact. One GC said plain and simply, you have to meet them where they are. Associates need a reason to work. Pay is not enough. And this is really going back to all the data we saw before. And really, this is applicable to associates and just younger attorneys in general. One GC said that he takes the slow yes in order to give the younger employees what they want. The data shows that you can be productive working remotely and having a more flexible working schedule. And that this generation is working, it's just in a different way. But with this data, eventually senior management won't be able to deny this, but people need to be patient and you need to work together in order to achieve that goal. The other interesting point, is saying that you really need to articulate, why you need people in the office. The associates and younger attorneys want business development and professional development. So curriculum can be designed as a tool to have them come into the office. Again, meaningful purpose, articulating why it's important they're there. It's more than just the work, but you do have to listen to what people want. One GC said that you have to listen to the whispers before they become screams. And really, a strong company culture and purpose is also a great way. I mean, one GC said that they put people first, and that's kind of the pillar of their company. It's an anchor. So the third question that was discussed is, what is the dynamic with outside counsel right now in this current climate? And what do GCs look for when hiring new lawyers? And one panelist said there was an unexpected positive from Zoom. It led to stronger relationships with outside counsel, who they hardly saw in person pre-pandemic anyway, because it was mostly conference calls. So that was one positive. I think to answer the question of what GCs are looking for, the answer still remains the same. We've heard before that they're looking for a business advisor. This is not new, but it's a good reminder that they want more than someone who could just provide legal advice. And a great example they shared and all agreed on was that it means someone who doesn't go the conservative route because they're concerned with risk. It's someone who will look ahead, try to peek around the corner, give options to help you achieve your goals. One of the other things we're looking for, again, is creativity in the RFP process. One example of how that actually translated for one firm was they were handling a patent litigation case, and they were pitching, trying to gather firms to see who could handle the litigation. In one RFP, the firm came back with a proactive way to go about defending the case, which meant, taking the lead in a counterclaim. And really, no other firm had brought these issues front and was creative in that sense. And they ended up hiring that law firm, and they ended up winning the case. And lastly, GCs hire lawyers, not law firms. Again, we've all heard this before, but what was surprising was that often firms don't follow this rule and think that the firm name is enough to get them the business. So this was something, like, again, this is something we all know, but good reminders to think about as well. And that leads into kind of one of the more interesting pieces of what are the mistakes that law firms are making to kill their chances. So all the GCs noted that they feel sometimes firms hide the ball. And what they meant by this was, for example, if one counsel is asking his client relationship partner for a referral for work that they need help with, The partner will give a recommendation of an attorney that they didn't know, that they've never worked with. And to them, this means that it showcases that, this is a result of partners being too worried about internal firm metrics like origination credits or what other metrics they have, and that it hurts their relationship with the client because they don't put the client first. As a result, this also means that the general counsel doesn't see the synergy between practice areas and different offices for the law firm they're working with. Again, because they often see that partners are too worried about the metrics. And really the bottom line is GCs want you to make them look good and not hold out because of internal metrics. Some other issues that came up included, diversity issues. And this was shared by a couple of GCs, that when interviewing a firm, they'll bring on their diverse attorneys. But once the work begins, they never see these attorneys again. And they actually really notice this, and they want to know the team that's working for them, and they want diversity. So this is an issue that they're still seeing across the board. One other area was what we'll say is lack of transparency or honesty. They want a firm that's going to be real and honest. One GC said, tell us if we're going to lose the case. Don't try to sugarcoat anything. We want to know now before it's too late and you weren't honest with us. One GC said he'll also exclude firms that say they don't want a certain type of work. To them, this signifies a little bit of snobbery, and sometimes they think the scrappier firm is better. And then finally, it's not utilizing firm data. We all know that firms are sitting on a trove of data. And, specifically when it came to pricing, one GC said that pricing shouldn't really be a mystery. You've handled a lot of similar cases, and they want to hear, from your years of experience around that data and what some of those answers might be, and not have so much mystery around that. So that was an interesting point as well. And so really the takeaways are that the client is always taking a risk. He's putting his job on the line. So outside counsel does need to know that. Again, they want you to be the trusted business advisor. And then the third is, really don't hide the ball. I think one GC said it nicely, is know thyself and then get to know thy client. Okay, so we're going to shift gears just a little bit. We've been hearing a lot around purpose and meaning, right? And after 2021, the legal sector is poised to really make meaningful change for clients that are committed to meaningful purpose. So this next session examined the impact of CSR and ESG investments and why firms need to care about this more. So quickly, what's propelling ESG? And really investors have propelled this. They're looking at structure and framework and really noted that Gen Z cares about this more, and it's becoming more of a priority. Banks are also getting into sustainable loans. They're requiring audits and reporting, and really it's becoming a part of the culture. Well, there's still a huge focus on DEI initiatives, but there's been kind of a shift in conversation now that's focusing on environmental issues. How much greenhouse gases are you producing, or how much paper are you using? And one panelist described it perfectly as, what's propelling ESG initiatives is the 3 T's, which is TikTok, Twitter, and teenagers. But one interesting point as well is that, ESG can really be used as a tool for employers to feel good about their work. I think they all noted that, we're hearing again, Gen Z wants a purpose or meaning. So there's no better time than now to focus on this. So there we go. Then the last part really is why and how do lawyers play a role in ESG, and why is it important? I think a few things they mentioned that stood out were, ESG presents an opportunity to advise companies on best practices, even if it's not legally mandated. It allows for lawyers to provide good counsel to defense or, some of the bad apples. And one example panelists gave is that lawyers are integral in advising defense on when to settle, so when to fold. In one case, a firm was representing a manufacturer in an asbestos case, and was integral in settlement discussions and determining, who is more responsible for damages and how it would be broken down fairly. So it's a lawyer's responsibility to ensure these matters don't put a strain on legal services. And then finally, in terms of predictions for ESG, all panelists said that mental health will be built into ESG in the next year. And that S, which is the social part, will really become more front and center. So E and G have always kind of been assumed. Okay, so I'm going to segue into the final portion of this presentation around the age-old topic of succession planning, and really why you should care about this. I mean, really over 28 million baby boomers retired in 2020. And so many firms are anticipating kind of the next exodus of senior partners, whether this is due to retirement or just turnover. Having a succession plan not only is integral for a seamless transition, but helps strengthen client relationships. And this is something we heard from all of the panelists who were all in-house counsel, said that it really strengthens the relationship with the client. Again, this isn't old news, but time and time again, in-house counsel see a huge gap here from law firms. So this is an opportunity to kind of take a look at where you can fill those gaps. And the bottom line is, in-house counsel does want to work with you on succession planning. They don't want to be left holding the bag if someone retires or leaves. And so one of the interesting portions is they talked about what firms are leaving on the table when it comes to succession planning. They mentioned that they're not being looped into the process early on. I mean, they want to know who the succession, who's taking over. They want to know the team, so they want to be involved, and they don't want to just be told that they're going to have to accept the new person who's coming in. They also mentioned that not thinking about it from a GC's perspective too is a common mistake or a thing a gap that they see, because a lot of companies are going through these same transitions as well. So you're dealing with a lot of the same issues, and they want to know what you as a law firm are doing about it and how you can maybe help them as well. They said, firms are not, what they're leaving on the table includes not fostering collaboration. And one in-house counsel said that he can tell a lot by a firm through their compensation structure. If it's an eat what you kill, then they're likely not fostering collaboration, according to him. But I think what bottom line is that they want to know what's going on. They want to be a part of it early on as well. Another thing that's been left on the table is, not going further down the food chain in terms of interacting with teams. They want to work with everyone on the team. They want to work with the associates, and they want the associates to work with others on their team as well. This is something they see doesn't happen a lot. The other part is, not sharing resources other than legal services. One in-house counsel said they want to know what the firm is doing. What are things that they're working on? We all know for a lot of companies and a lot of firms, DEI initiatives are at the forefront. They're most likely handling the same issues, and this is an opportunity to present knowledge and share about different initiatives that firms are doing that they may be able to adopt as well. And then lastly, one in-house counsel really said that they enjoy presentations, that they want their firm to provide presentations on certain legal issues that affect them. This is a good opportunity for both in-house and outside firms to share knowledge. So that concludes the recap. I know the last portions were short and sweet, and we really couldn't go through all of the sessions today. I know I covered a lot of issues around what firms are grappling with. And I know this probably maybe barely scratched the surface, and we could probably spend hours digging deeper into all these issues. But for most of you listening, I know you're grappling with the same problems. And while there's no magic bullet around problems like associate retention and the generational gap, hopefully this recap, helps you look at some of these from a different perspective to see what other firms are doing, and hopefully inspires you at your firm to look at this as an opportunity to innovate as well. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this, and please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. I'm happy to connect with you afterwards. So thank you all.